thing come out. So my name is Jill Meyers, and I'm really honored to be the host for this interview series, and especially for today's amazing event. A little bit about me. I'm a private pilot since age 17. I'm an Air Force veteran, aerospace engineer, professional speaker, advocate for women in STEM, and particularly aviation and aerospace. I've been connected to the Red Door films, to Mattia Carell, who's with me up in the left photo, and Hilary Prentice, who's on with us today. Since I helped them plan and hosted this event, or emceed rather this event with the WASP in 2016. The top right photo is one of my favorites. That's me with WASP B. Haydu, who sadly recently passed away. Mattia Carell is the director and creator of this documentary and TV miniseries we'll discuss a little bit as well. And if you want to hear Mattia's story, if you go to our Fly Girls Facebook page, hopefully you're all on that watching right now. We interviewed Mattia and Hilary and Molly Merriman from Kent State a few weeks ago, and you can watch that interview as well. Plus, you can also watch the interviews with the first two pilots that we spoke with. Today, we have one of my favorite people on the planet as our guest, Jacquelyne Nichols, who I've known for 4 years now, I think. So Jacquelyne has served 11 years as active duty in the U.S. Marine Corps, and now is with the Marine Corps Reserves. She has flown, which I will tell you is unique, and we'll talk about this, both rotorcraft, helicopters, and fixed-wing aircraft. She's completed several overseas deployments, including one to Afghanistan, where she earned a Strike Flight Air Medal, and she has quite a few medals and things behind her head in her office there. She has also deployed to Okinawa and had 2 deployments to Qatar. Jacquelyne transitioned to the reserves in 2019 and flies a very special aircraft called the UC-35 Delta out of Joint Base Andrews in the DC area. We would also be remiss if we didn't congratulate Jacquelyne, who just recently got promoted and pinned on the rank of Major. Congratulations, Major Nichols. Jacquelyne actually lives here in New Mexico, where I am as well. And she and her husband help run the family ranch, and they have cattle and orchards and goats and all kinds of cool stuff. And lastly, Jacquelyne is the president of the first ever Women in Aviation International chapter here in New Mexico, called the Land of Enchantment chapter. Jacquelyne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jill. And what she failed to mention is that she founded that WAI chapter.
Yes, I did. But it's in good hands now. It's in better hands. And then Hilary Prentice. So Hilary has been with the Red Door films and with Mattia since 2015. Recently collaborated with Mattia on both the Emmy-nominated HBO film The Tale and on Fabrice Jabert's film Safety. Hilary is also producing Mattia's newest feature film called The Boy on the Bus. She's also working with Emmy-winning writer Chuck Sklar, producing his first feature film, Caught Stealing with Chris Rock. Hilary is producing this Coming Home documentary and is also producing the dramatic series I mentioned earlier, which is going to be called Fly Girls. So Hilary, thank you so much for everything that you were all doing with the Red Door films.
Oh my gosh, Jill, thank you so much for the incredible intros and being here with us through, this is our 4th interview and our grand finale in our September Dare Mighty Things series. We are recording this, so we will post it after. I'm also recording on my Zoom for the audio. We are considering starting a podcast series with Dare Mighty Things, so stay tuned. But Dare Mighty Things is part of our Pathways to Flight partnership with Kent State University, which we are so excited about. And the title of the documentary is Coming Home, Fight for a Legacy. And in Mattia's and my opinion, fighting for this legacy couldn't be more fully realized without this incredible partnership with Kent State, which will ensure the life beyond a theatrical release and really a much more meaningful, if you ask our opinion, the educational side of this film is what's so important to us. So the film will be used as an inspiration, and Jill's very excited about this, for a Sky Hack competition. Sky Hack is at Kent State University. This is their 3rd year, I believe, where they will get teams of students together. And the purpose of Sky Hack is to address issues in aerospace and aviation. So for example, shortage of pilots. We all know that shortage of pilots is a huge problem, and Play with Purpose is our competition stream that the Red Door Films is sponsoring. It will be a competition stream to encourage students to design action figures, a toy universe. I mean, dare I say WASP toy universe. Imagine if we could rival the Marvel universe. That would be incredible. So inspired by our WASP, inspired by Avenger Field, inspired by other women pilots, including the African-American women pilots who flew at Tuskegee. Coming to you soon will be action figures designed by students at Kent State University.
Yeah, I'm ridiculously excited about that. Let me tell you, it's going to be really awesome. So we can't wait to hear more about that. So I mentioned in the introduction that I first really connected with Hilary and Mattia at an event we had in 2016. We held a panel called The Greatest Generation Meets the Next Generation, Women in Flight. We had several members of the WASP Corps there, and we had several, if you want to call them current day, female military pilots on the panel. And then in 2017, a year later, the Red Door Films held a second panel, and that is when Major Nichols came into play. So Hilary, why don't you talk about how you and Jacquelyne first connected at this event?
Oh, this is one of my favorite stories. So as Jill helped plan our first big event, we'd had a couple smaller events, and this was both to raise money and to increase public awareness. We do have a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. We are currently fundraising. We have a We Did It campaign, which we'll share later in the interview, but our links are everywhere on our social media platforms and on our website, so do check it out. But Jacquelyne was so kind to come and promote our work and to promote the WASP. And the first thing she did was meet me at 5 o'clock in the morning to go on CBS to promote this event. There's a photo of us. God, you look beautiful for having gotten no sleep, because she was coming from San Diego. So it's like a 2-hour, drive up here. But we were on, and that was the first time I met her. And then she came to be on our panel, and the purpose of the panel, The Greatest Generation Meets the Next Generation, really is to bring the WASP into the present, to acknowledge what they did. There's Jacquelyne, she's escorting Shirley Cruz, who is still alive, one of the few still alive, one of the main characters in our film. You saw her in our trailer. And it really showed, and Jacquelyne will be able to speak to this more, but it really showed how the WASP, we are standing on their shoulders. We would not be here if not for them. And it's just so important, I think, to connect that history to the present. I think we have a much better understanding of the present when we understand our past and all of its complexities and the contributions that the WASP made during World War II. Most people don't know about the WASP. Even if they do know about the WASP, they don't know the extent. They might know, oh, they ferried some planes. These women were on the cutting edge of aviation technology. They were the first to pilot the B-29, which ended the war. That was the plane that carried the atom bomb. And however you feel about that, that is what ended the war. And if they hadn't piloted that plane, who knows how much longer the war would have gone on. So there are many instances like that. They were also involved in the first drone technology, and all of this was kept secret for 35 years because there's many issues which we don't have time to get into, but they were never fully recognized as being in the military, and so they were considered experimental. And so as what happens, the military keeps, experiments secret. So they just sort of go away, into the annals of history. Nobody knows about them until the 70s, when the Air Force announces that they are going to allow the first women pilots. And these women pipe up and say, oh, no, we were here first. And that's what our trailer alludes to when you see, the Be Hey Do and the publicity campaign that they waged. And it took them 5 years, but they did eventually get veteran status. And the point that we make in the documentary is, yes, they got veteran status in the 70s, but we still don't learn about them in school. They're not in the history books. They're not in our World War II movies and television shows where they talk about World War II. You never hear about the WASP. And that's what we hope to change.
Yeah, and I also want to comment. So the background behind, I'm going to move the background behind myself and Hilary.
Yeah.
Is of Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, which is the first location where they did all of their flight training. And there's a museum there as well, the WASP Museum. So if you are anywhere in Central Texas and want to head out to Sweetwater, check out Avenger Field. So before we move on, I just want to make everyone know that please put comments and questions in the comments on Facebook, and they will be fed to us to handle during this event. We'll have sort of Q&A at the end, but they're getting fed to me live, so I'll see them as they come in. So Jacquelyne, we're going to start out with you with the first question we've asked all of our pilots so far. Tell us about the first spark that got you really jazzed about aviation and flying, and then what made you consider and then join the U.S. Marine Corps.
So my dad is a retired Marine. He served for 28 years and he was a career recruiter, which is a little bit unheard of in the Marine Corps. He recruited for 18 years. And due to that, we were actually co-located with a lot of Air Force bases instead of Marine Corps bases. And so I was exposed to aviation early on, just seeing planes flying, seeing pilots. But it wasn't until I was in 4th grade and I did a research paper on Amelia Earhart that the thought even entered my mind that women could be pilots too, because I hadn't seen one at that point and I hadn't heard of any. And so doing that research paper on Amelia Earhart just completely opened my eyes. And I had always been one of those kids that, you know, when a plane flies over, you look at the sky. And so that was it. I mean, that was the spark. And from that point forward, I wanted to be a pilot, but I had really bad vision. And I had heard that pilots had to have good vision. And so it was one of those dreams that I always kept in the back of my head, but I didn't think, you know, I just didn't think I could do it. And it wasn't until I started taking flying lessons. So I went to college, I graduated, not thinking I could be a pilot. And while I was working, I was a health and wellness director at a YMCA. I decided to take flying lessons just because that spark never went away. And my flight instructor, his name's Dylan Crapes, he actually told me he was in the Navy and he was instructing on the side just for fun, just because he loved flying that much. And he told me that the military was now accepting laser eye surgery. And it just so happened I was a perfect candidate for PRK. And that's the only one they were accepting initially. Later on, they started accepting LASIK as well. So I went and paid out of pocket to get PRK because I just really wanted to be a pilot. And you know, as far as being a Marine, you know, I did go to the other branches because I don't know, the way I saw it was like going to the Marine Corps was like going into the family business. It was like the easy way in a weird kind of twisted way in my mind, just because it's what my dad did. And I knew a lot about it. And none of them worked out, you know, it just wasn't the right fit for me. And the Marine Corps was. And so that's how I ended up joining the Marine Corps. I mean, there's a whole lot more to the story if you want to know more, but that's the short version.
Well, I do want to, it's great. And, you know, it's a very common story. I think everyone we've had on so far, including me, has talked about the always looking up when you see airplanes, because that definitely the common theme, I think, when the passion has kicked in for us at a really early age. I do want to talk about something that, again, we mentioned in the beginning that, you know, in all of my years in and working around the military, I don't think it's all that common. So you started out flying helicopters, rotorcraft, and then you now fly fixed wing. So can you talk a little bit about, first of all, what that transition was like? Because, you know, I'm a licensed fixed wing pilot and I took one helicopter lesson, and the first thing the guy said is, you must fly airplanes because you suck at this, because it's completely backwards and not intuitive at all. So talk about what made you make that switch and sort of what was that transition like? Because it's really not common.
So whenever I joined and became a pilot, I always knew I wanted to fly helicopters. I know a lot of people think everybody joins to fly jets, but I didn't. I wanted helicopters. I wanted that troop interaction. I wanted to do, you know, insertions, extractions. I really enjoy the team aspect of flying helicopters. It's not just a one-man show. I just don't like being alone in the air. I rather have a team and have conversation and work together. But whenever I made the transition, really what it boiled down to is I was up for orders and I wanted to stay co-located with my husband, but I also wanted to continue to fly. And the Marine Corps has a way of painting you into a corner of choosing one, and I refused to. And there was an opening for what we call station pilot at a squadron right across the street from me, where I could stay, in my current location, stay co-located with my husband, and also continue to fly. And the monitor, it's the person who decides jobs, actually laughed in my face when I told him that, because it's just such a rare job to get. There's very few openings. And a couple of weeks after our career meeting, I got an email from him that I had orders to be a station pilot. So I was able to fly a fixed wing aircraft. So it's not completely unusual in the Marine Corps, because we all start off flying fixed wing aircraft. I used to fly the T-34 Mentor. I'm aging myself. They fly the T-6 now, but we all start off in a fixed wing aircraft, and then from there go on to whatever designation we get, whether it be jets, C-130s or helicopters. So I had already flown fixed wing and I had taken lessons before I joined. But I'd say the biggest difference once I started flying the Citation is, it's a private jet. We use it for passenger transport. Was taking off and landing, because I was used to taking off and landing at very, very, very slow speeds. And the Citation is not the fastest plane in the world, but it was really fast for me. That first takeoff, I was like, whoa, and it climbs so fast at low altitudes. And so I was, 5,000 feet before I even had time to blink or think about what just happened. And so it was just my brain getting caught up with the aircraft at that point. And then also the sight picture, because whenever you're flying a 53, the way our blades are canted down, we actually have to flare and pull back as we're coming in for landing. So you're actually kind of looking up as you're landing and coming down. And then the Citation, you're actually pointing your nose down a bit. And it was very uncomfortable for me at first, but after 3 or 4 flights, you get the hang of it and you learn your new sight picture. But I've enjoyed flying both of them tremendously.
That's really great. So for those of you that may not understand, so the UC-35 is the military designation of an aircraft that's actually a Cessna Citation jet. So, which there's Jacqueline's pointing to photo. So for those of you just joining us, we are speaking with Hilary Prentice from the Red Door Films, an amazing company in the LA area making the documentary Coming Home, and also a TV miniseries in the future called Fly Girls about the World War II women Air Force service pilots. And we're today interviewing my good friend Jacquelyne Nichols, who is a major in the United States Marine Corps Reserves. And so, Jacquelyne, let's connect these two now. So why don't you tell us how you first learned of the WASP? I know you're one of the few people who does know about them and did when I first met you. So what was your first experience learning about the WASP?
So that flight instructor that I told you about, named Dylan, not only did he kind of guide me in the right direction to join the Marine Corps, he was also the first person that told me about the WASP. He knew a lot about them. He told me about them. And of course, I was immediately enthralled, because you just don't see that many female aviators, and I had no idea they had been in World War II. So I was just immediately fascinated and enthralled with them. And whenever I soloed an aircraft, a Cessna 152, when I was taking lessons before joining, he was extremely kind and actually gave me a photographed or a framed photograph of some of the WASP pilots, and had actually bought a set of WASP wings himself and put them at the top and matted it and framed it and everything is like a congratulations for my first solo flight. So that really just sealed the deal. Once I had their wings and a picture of them, it hangs on a wall in my house to this day. So he was my first introduction. And then after that, I was hooked.
That's fantastic.
And like the WASP, I'm getting a sense of you, Jacquelyne, both from doing something very different within the military, flying both helicopters and planes, and joining the military, that you are not one who takes no for an answer, and that you find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, and that's exactly how our WASP were too. I mean, it's really amazing. Some of them had children. When about 20%, according to Dr. Molly Merriman, had children, and they left their children either with grandparents, their parents, or their husbands who perhaps could not serve, active duty, stayed at home. and watch them while they went off to fly. So I'm so glad you at least knew of them, and we'll have to thank your flight instructor. I just want to ask, so someone as confident as you are, have you ever had a moment where you felt fear while flying?
Plenty.
I wonder if you like roller coasters from that descending into 3,000, 5,000 feet in 3 seconds. It's like, woo.
I have lots of stories. I mean, I don't think you can fly without fear, you know, at some point. And sometimes the fear is self-induced. Sometimes it's just, you know, am I gonna do the right thing? Am I gonna impress my instructors? Am I gonna impress my my squadron mates? You know, some of that is just that inherent fear of you know, doing the right thing and being a good pilot. But I would say fear for my life a few times. And I'll just tell you one quick story. I've got another if you want to hear it, but I've only declared an emergency twice in my 11, 12 plus years of flying. And one of them was actually in the citation. And it was another pilot and I who were flying. And as we were descending, all of a sudden our aircraft started this gentle kind of roll to the side. And I wasn't in the flying seat, I was in the non-flying seat. And so I said to him, like, hey, are you turning on purpose? Because we hadn't gotten any directions from ATC to turn. And he's like, no. And then he looks down, and he realizes, I mean, because it was just so in general, it was barely detectable. So he grabs the yoke, he ditches the autopilot, and he's trying to correct it, and it won't correct. And so we just keep going. And we're in controlled airspace. We're in alpha airspace at this point. And so we start getting real nervous. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, I thought I was about to go upside down in a plane that's not meant to. And, you know, we're doing everything that we can. I mean, there's not an emergency procedure for this. This is completely unheard of. And so I declared an emergency because we weren't following the flight path we were supposed to. We end up getting to about 30 plus degrees angle of bank, and then the aircraft started to come back. And at that point, we're like, okay, good, we're good. It's righting itself, we're fine. And then it just keeps on going the other direction. And so at this point, we definitely realize we have some sort of controllability issue. The aircraft is driving itself into a turn. And, you know, I worked with ATC, asked for a long runway with a, you know, Cessna service center, and they diverted us, and ATC was amazing. And at some point in the descent, it stopped just as quickly as it started, and we were fine. And it turns out once they did the maintenance, they basically discovered that it was a bad roll servo clutch that was original to the airframe, and the airframe was about 20 years old, and so it had never been changed. And so this roll servo just went bad and decided to drive. And so we were, you know, just driving into this turn, but we were descending out of like 38,000 feet. So we had plenty of time, but like I said, I thought I was about to end up upside down in a plane that's not meant to.
What's your other story? What's your other one?
The other story is when I got shot at. I'm sure I got shot at plenty in Afghanistan that I don't know about, but we were doing a mission. The Taliban had actually landed some IDF rounds, indirect fire rounds, on the base that I was at, Camp Leatherneck, or Bastion was the airfield. And they had actually landed the rounds on the base. And the general at the time, who was in charge of the area of operations, decided he wanted the rocket rails that they used so that they couldn't do it again. And so we were given the mission to insert Marines to retrieve these rocket rails. And the place where those rocket rails were identified to be located was in an area that we had nicknamed the Triangle of Death, because anytime anybody went near, there were like basically 3 points. And anytime anybody went near those 3 points, they would get shot at. It wasn't an if, it was a when. And we were going right in the middle of that. And we were going daytime, which is unheard of in combat situations, because we typically do these things at night because we have a night advantage with MBGs and other night capabilities. And so as we were going in, you know, sometimes when you just know things aren't right, you get that spidey sense, and the hair on the back of your neck stands up, and we all got that. And as we were going in, I saw a gentleman standing off in a field with an AK-47 over his shoulder, and you just know, like, this is not right, we shouldn't be here. And basically at that point, we took 2 rounds to the aircraft. And the only way I can describe it is that it sounded like a soda can coming out of a soda machine, that clunk clunk noise. and my first instinct was to look at the instruments. So I just wanted to know if we'd lost anything, if it had affected any of our systems, because I knew nobody had gotten hurt. It had definitely hit the aircraft, but one of them actually landed under my seat. And I'll be completely honest, the very first thought that went through my mind was Forrest Gump and getting shot in the buttocks, because it landed right underneath my seat. But all of our instruments were fine. None of our systems were affected. It landed on metal, and that was it. And we continued the mission. We were on insert at that point. So we just continued down, executed our landing, and that was it.
So Jacquelyne, just for the lay person here, what do you, how do you deal with fear when, do you have any strategies? I mean, is it all instinctual? Do you just keep calm and you're just like doing the checklist of how to stay alive kind of thing? And do you feel feelings after, or there, is there sort of mental training that you could, give some advice to people?
I think you actually described it pretty perfectly. You deal with it. You use your checklist, you use your training. We go through extensive training. We are extremely stressed out during flight school, and it's all for a purpose, because if you're stressed out in a situation that's completely controlled and you're able to work your way through it, then that will apply later on once you're in a situation that's maybe abnormal or unusual. In both cases, these were, being shot at, you can't really train for that, but you can train under stress and pressure. And like I said, the first thing I did after I heard the, bullets hit the aircraft was look at my flight instruments, because I wanted to know what was going to be affected and how I needed to react. And in the case of the servo drive, it was immediately like, what checklist do we have? Let's ditch the autopilot and hand fly this thing. So you're absolutely right. You use a checklist, you use your training, and then after you land, because you have to compartmentalize these things. You can't feel feelings during this stuff. You really can't. You have to shove it way down deep inside. And then once you land is when you have that decompression time and, talk about it or just go for a run or whatever it is that you use to cope.
Yeah, the military training really is incredible. I was stationed in Europe during peacetime, but our base was bombed. So I went through, we did training every quarter where you played war basically and prep for that. I also wanted to mention that after I left the military, I actually managed an organization for a defense contractor where I spent about 14 months managing about 95 people all full-time in Afghanistan at a whole bunch of bases, including Leatherneck, Jacquelyne. And most of our employees were ex-military because they knew how to handle that kind of pressure. And as Jacquelyne said, you get trained on it, but there's something about that military training where you just really learn that focus, especially as an aviator. The first thing is fly the plane, right? And so yeah, but it is really impressive even when you hear it from folks. So Jacquelyne, now you're in the reserves. So tell us what's like a typical, I know you go for drill, as we call it at Andrews. So what's a typical cycle like for you when you do your military time right now as a reservist?
So the unit that I fly with is a little bit different. We don't do the typical like 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year, because the majority of people who drill are pilots. And if we all showed up at the same time, we couldn't all fly. So they kind of let us make our schedule. I just find a time that's good for me, and I'll go for me personally, I go for like a week or two just to make it worth it since I'm flying across the country. And when I'm there, they do a really good job of maximizing my time and utilizing me properly because I'm an instructor. And so whenever I'm there, I'm either flying a mission, instructing, or, usually my first flight back, if I haven't flown in 30 days, is a proficiency flight. I have to, make sure that I'm proficient, do 3 takeoffs and landings before I can sign for an aircraft as an aircraft commander. But they just do a really good job of flying me almost every day that I'm there and utilizing, me either as an instructor or to accomplish missions. And like I said, we're passenger transport. So the majority of people that we transport are dignitaries, colonels, generals, things like that. I think the last dignitary that I transported was the architect of the Air Force. So
Nice.
Yeah, that's good.
Fabulous. So if you're just joining us, we are speaking here with Jacquelyne Nichols, who's a Marine Corps pilot, and Hilary Prentice, who is producer at the Red Door Films. So Hilary,
Jacquelyne,
you have a
I just have a quick
Jacquelyne.
I have a quick question for you, especially now that you're in the reserves. I remember one of my favorite questions that we got to ask you and your two fellow female Marine pilots we got to interview when you were stationed at Miramar. We loved asking you all what your call signs were. So I would love to ask you your call sign, and do you still have your call sign in the reserves?
I do. I still use my call sign in the reserves. So different branches do call signs different ways, even different aircraft in each branch does it a little bit different. And the Marine Corps, we're particularly bad about insulting each other, ribbing, joking. And so usually our call signs are not, like the Air Force, like laser and blaze. We usually, it's something you did that was really stupid or embarrassing, or some play on your name. One of my former COs, his last name was Spears, and so he got the call sign Brittany. And so for me, the simple answer is, I was always seen riding my bike around base, because I was doing triathlons and stuff, and so that's how I got bike. But it's really not. It goes a lot deeper than that, which also goes a little bit into the misogynist culture, I'm not going to lie, of the Marine Corps. In that, okay, so my call sign is an acronym, and it stands for basically, I know everything. And I would say, as a female in a predominantly male organization, when you have drive and passion, and you're aggressive about learning things and being knowledgeable and understanding how things work, you're not seen as having a thirst for knowledge. You're seen as being invasive and nosy and persistent. And that's how I got my call sign, is that I had a thirst for knowledge. I had a thirst for knowing how everything worked. And I just wanted to know everything that I could about the airplane, about operations. And I think some of my male peers got a little intimidated by that. So they gave me the call sign Bike, and it hurt. It stung. I'm not going to lie, but you know what? Never show fear, never show that they've hurt you. And so I embraced it. And this sign right here hung on my desk after that. I'm wearing bicycle earrings. So, if they try to hurt you, you fight back. I've got coffee cups with bikes on them. I fully embraced it. So that's how I got my call sign.
I love it. Yeah, I got taught that at a very young age too, when I was about 5 years old, that when you get a name that you don't like, you just embrace it, and you're like, fine, that's what you're going to call me. All right, I'll take on that name. I would love to at this time just quickly go through. I mean, you've got Fly Girl behind you. You've got this incredible, medals on your wall. You've got dogs with airplanes. You want to just kind of quickly take us through what you got going on back there?
Sure. So I'll actually start, let's see, I'll start over here. Well, no, I'll start over here. So they're called squadronposters.com. So that is the T-34 Turbo Mentor. That was the first plane I ever flew in the Marine Corps. And then over here is the TH-57, which is the first helicopter I flew in the Marine Corps. That is the CH-53 Echo, and you can see it's got Japan and the American flag on it. And I got that from a street artist who did spray paint in Okinawa, Japan, when I was deployed there. And then this over here is my going away plaque from my first fleet squadron, which was HMH 466. And then because I couldn't find a squadron poster or anything cool of the Cessna Citation, I'm a huge fan of the Blue Dog. Most people from New Orleans know what it is and who the artist is. And this is not an original, can't afford them. This is a knockoff, but so anyways, I think my husband actually ordered that for me. And, because it's got the little fixed wing airplane. And then this one right here is my going away plaque from my most recent squadron, H&HS at Marine Corps Station Miramar. And then this is the shadow box that my husband got for me when I left active duty service. So you can see on the sides, the rank goes all the way up to captain. My major rank isn't reflected here. It's got my shooting badges, both of which I'm expert, just so you all know. And then my squadron patches, the different squadrons I was part of. That was my deployment call sign patch when I went to Afghanistan. a couple different sets of wings. He included the wasp wings because he knows how much they mean to me. And then these are my different medals. And the one I'm probably most proud of that Jill mentioned in the intro is the Air Medal Strike Flight numeral 3. And that's due to combat action because as a pilot, we can't get combat action ribbons. And so that's kind of the next closest thing. And then the rest of those are just, I think I might actually have a Navy and a Marine Corps Achievement Medal up there and a OEF and, just different medals, but I'm most proud of the Air Medal. And then I've just got some pictures over here. That's actually from my TBS class, the basic school. All officers have to go through that. And I got a whole bunch more back here, but hopefully that's enough. And then this is just a really cool piece of an airplane. Again, my husband, amazing, supportive person. He had it individually crafted for me. So I think he bought it the way it is, but then what you can't see at the bottom is it says, Jacquelyne Nichols.
That is so cool. That's amazing. So congratulations on all you've accomplished. And I know it's not over. So with everything you've done, Jacquelyne, if there's any possible way to single out a mission that was, really important and impactful to you over and above all, I don't know if it's even a fair question, but we'll toss it out there anyway, because I'm sure you've done just a ton of incredibly important flights, but is there like a special one you might want to share with folks?
Yeah, there's a lot, but the one that stands out to me the most that I reflect the most heavily on was actually in the citation. I think in the 53, I did a lot of really exciting things, where we push boats out the back and guys jump into the water and, rappelling through the, door in the bottom of the helicopter, really cool, exciting stuff. But the citation, I said it's passenger transport. One day we were supposed to do a mission. We were actually supposed to carry an Air Force general. And my commanding officer got a call from one of his friends who was commanding officer at the Wounded Warriors unit over at Balboa. And he said, hey, I have a favor to ask. I need to get a Marine home. And the thing that was unique about this particular mission is that the Marine that we needed to get home, the reason we were taking him home was so that he could pass away. I still get choked up, but it was years ago. He was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he had served in multiple combat deployments. And after he had come home, he discovered that I believe it was pancreatic cancer. It was very aggressive, and really his prognosis was about 2 weeks. And they wanted to get him home to his family so that he could die with his loved ones. And I'll tell you, from every aspect of that flight, people knew what was going on and everyone was touched and affected. And I never knew this Marine when he was healthy, but when I saw him, you could tell that he was a former shell of himself. I mean, he was skin and bones. His wife was with him, and a sergeant major that he had worked under during 2 of those deployments was with him as well. And they escorted him, and I believe we took him to Oklahoma City is where he went from San Diego. And I just remember one of the things that touched me the most was one of the Marines working on the flight line that day who had to manifest them. He handed me the manifest in the most ceremonial way. I mean, it was like he was handing me the flag of a deceased service member. That's how much weight that manifest had to that Marine, because he knew. Sorry.
That's amazing. No, don't apologize.
And Hilary, like you said, like sometimes, what do you do in those situations? This was one of those situations where I couldn't think about it. I had to fly that plane. I had a mission, and my mission was to get that Marine home safely so that he could be with his loved ones. And that was my mission. And I got him there, and we landed. And the other pilot that I was flying with, we got done and we went and grabbed lunch, and we both just sat there, I mean, in silence, just kind of staring at each other like, wow, it's so hard to process what you've just done, and we had such a small role in it, but it was definitely the most impactful flight I've had. I mean, bar none.
Wow, that's really amazing. Congratulations on that and all that you've done to help people in so many different ways. It's really something, really something. Yeah. So again, put any questions you have for Jacquelyne or Hilary or myself in Facebook. So Jacquelyne, there's a note from Ann Wallace King that says, good morning. Thank you for letting me know about your interview. Margaret Said said woohoo, so woohoo to all of us. And Judy's thanking us for sharing all of this. So thank you all for being on.
Thank you so much, Jacquelyne. I want to know about when you first heard about one of your namesakes in the WASP. So if you remember you told me that story too when you were flying, I think, about the.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, so
Yeah.
The founder of WASP, if you don't know, her name is Jacquelyne Cochran, and she's actually an amazing aviator. She holds tons of records. I think maybe still to this day. I know she holds a ton of records as far as going up without, because we didn't have, what's the word I'm looking for, pressurized aircraft years ago. And so she was one of the first pilots who would go up to certain altitudes without pressurization. And I remember reading a book or a website, and she had said something about, well, I would just fly up, I'd lose a little bit of consciousness, I'd wake up, I'd make sure the aircraft was in the position it needed to be in, and then I'd pass out again. And so to me, there's a little controversy around her, but to me, she's an amazing woman. And I'm so proud of that connection, that I share a name with her. And so whenever I was flying out of San Diego, anytime I would fly, there's an airport there. It's KTRM, it's Thermal Airport, but the official name of the airport is Jacquelyne Cochran Airport. And funny you mentioned that, Hilary. I don't know if I've ever told you this part. Every time I would fly with somebody over that airport, if I hadn't already told them, I would tell them, hey, do you know what the official name of that airport is? It's Jacquelyne Cochran Airport. Oh, do you know who Jack Cochran is? Well, let me tell you. And it was actually because of that I got connected to you, Hilary, because one of the pilots that I told that to was a guy by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Miklos. His call sign is Big Slew, and Big Slew is the one who told me about your efforts in the panel that I was able to be part of. And so that's actually how I got connected to you. So
Wow.
The WASP brought us all together.
I love it. And Big Slew, we got to get Big Slew involved. I think that airport, I know it's one of the only, if not the only airport named for a woman. It's a private airport. Yeah. And Jackie, she was the first to break the sound barrier, first woman pilot to break the sound barrier. Chuck Yeager was a good friend of hers. Really fascinating woman. I definitely encourage everybody listening to go do a deep dive. I'm sure it still ruffles her that people know who Amelia Earhart is, but they don't know who Jackie Cochran is. I think her comment when Amelia Earhart got lost, was like, she was never good at navigation. That was one of her comments. I do have another question for you, Jacquelyne, which is sort of going back to your dad being in the Marines and the military. This is maybe a two-part question. One, how did he feel about you going into the Marines, being a woman? And two, what made you choose military over, we've had a couple other female pilots on. We had a woman who's in the corporate world, flying for corporations. And we had Carol Hobson, who flies for United Airlines. Kim Kish was the woman we had on who flies corporate. So you represent the military for us in this Dare Mighty Things series. So wondered, I guess that, two-part question.
So as far as my dad goes, he was a career recruiter, as I mentioned. And so a lot of people are like, oh, he must have recruited you in. And the truth is he never really encouraged or discouraged me away from it. I think he wanted me to make my own choices. And my dad was always extremely supportive of anything that I do. And I told you that I kind of went to all the other branches. A small funny story about that. And I'm sorry in advance to anybody in the Army. But he had worked a little bit with the Army at some point in his career. And whenever I mentioned that I was looking at the Army Warrant Officer helicopter program, he did not support me at all. And my dad has always supported me. And so I was like, okay, he's always supported me. I should probably, go look at a different service. But, when I mentioned to him, I was in high school when I first thought about joining the military. When I mentioned it to him, the only thing that he said to me about that was, just promise me you'll be an officer. And I didn't understand at the time why he said that and why he made me promise him that. But I did. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to join, I'll be an officer. I mean, I'm going to go to college. And I know he valued me going to school. He was the first person in his family to go to school, and that was after he retired. And so, you know, it was very important for me to go to college, and I did. And now I realize in hindsight, the reason he wanted me to be an officer is this: he wanted me to be treated better, because the enlisted aren't always treated the best. And I see that now, and understand why he wanted that. And then as far as why I wanted to join, you know, I could say all the novel things, service to our country, dedication, but really I wanted adventure, and I wanted to be pushed. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to know what I was capable of. And I think most people agree that the Marine Corps is one of the toughest branches to join and be a part of. We have the highest physical fitness standards. And I just really wanted to know if I was capable of accomplishing those things. And of course, all the novel reasons I wanted to support my country. But, you know, a lot of people had asked me when I was just about to join, you know, why you know, why you're a girl, why would you? And I'm like, why not? I'm physically fit, I'm mentally capable. Why not?
I love that. And, you know, if there were anybody, actually, I'll first just say, it sounds like I'm getting a nice theme here. You have a supportive father, a supportive husband, supportive men around you, supportive people around you. It's amazing what we can do when we have support. But I'll just say, do you have any words of I don't know, wisdom or advice, or, you know, for the next generation of female pilots, shall we say?
You know, I love aviation, but it is challenging, and I love the challenge. I love, you know, you never know what you're going to get on every flight. Every flight is different. The process to becoming a pilot, it's long, it's hard, and it's challenging. And so you have to be in it to win it. You got to be in it for the long haul. You know, it's not a short, easy process. And so I would just say, be dedicated, and don't let the naysayers get you down. You know, if people are discouraging you, find a new support system, because they're not it. You know, you're right. I've been extremely fortunate, you know, all the way from my first flight instructor who encouraged me and helped me along my way, my parents, my husband, you know, other pilots that I've flown with, because it hasn't all been support for me. You know, the Marine Corps is the smallest branch and has the smallest percentage of females. And it wasn't always easy. You know, the last two commands that I've been at, the one I'm at now and the one before that, HNHS Miramar, were fantastic. I had wonderful COs who encouraged me. I wouldn't be an instructor if it weren't for one of my COs. I didn't believe in myself, and he believed in me enough to push me to become an instructor. So I have been super fortunate with really supportive men, but I've also had really bad experiences with very negative, very not supportive men. And I did have two terrible commanding officers who were extremely misogynist. And I mean, I just can't even begin to tell you how discouraging it was to work for them. One actually got relieved. The one that was my commanding officer, my Afghanistan deployment, he was relieved in country of being commanding officer. That's how bad he was. And he was particularly nasty to females. So it's not easy, but it's worth it.
I like hearing those stories, because, you know, even in the film world too, a lot of times, you know, you kind of look at a film that's been released, and you don't know, like in our situation, we've been at this since, well, I joined with Mattia in 2015, but Mattia, the director and producer and the creator behind all of this, has been researching and developing this project for a lot longer. And believe me, we get a lot of no's, and we get no's every day. So, you know, but I think the message of the WASP and your message is that, you know, when you have a dream, you gotta keep going for it. And where there's a will, there's a way. And, you know, you want to stay on base with your husband, so you'll learn how to fly you know, aircraft. You know, you've got some tough commanding officers. That's what CO stands for, by the way, for our audience who's not in the military. You know, you're on a sports team and you have a bad coach, or, you know, like you said, you're around maybe friends who aren't as supportive. You gotta lose your friends. If you can't lose your coach or your boss, you gotta find a way. You gotta find a way to stay positive and not let them bring you down.
Yeah, Jacquelyne, I think you're an amazing example of resilience and perseverance and dedication, for sure. I just wanted to throw out really quick, speaking of Jackie Cochran, there's a fairly new book about her. I don't know if you know about this. It's called Fighting for Space. Sorry about the crazy.
Oh, cool.
This is called Fighting for Space, and what it's about Jackie Cochran and Jerry Cobb, who I'll tell you about in a second, who apparently were the two women who wanted to be the first women in space. So this book, I just got it. I haven't read it yet. It just was published last year, I think. And so Jackie Cochran, as we talked about, the founder of the WASP, Jerry Cobb was one of the Mercury 13, who are 13 women who in the 60s passed all of the first round of medical training to be an astronaut, scored higher than most of the men like Alan Shepard, John Glenn, and were not allowed to be astronauts because they were women. So amazing, amazing women. And anyway, so this is the newest book that I have that is partly about Jackie Cochran. So I wanted to toss that out there.
Thanks. Thanks, Jill. Yeah, I love it. We'll have a library. We'll start a book club too. We'll be like Reese Witherspoon.
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea.
Well, I just wanted to ask Jacquelyne to tie it all back together. When Big Slew, I love that call. Love that call sign. When he told you about us and what it was a lot for you to come and help us on your free time, and you've been so generous with your time, and you continue to help us fundraise, and you're one of our ambassadors. Why is our project important to you, and why is it important now? Why should we care about these women from the 40s?
Because little girls need role models too. I told you I didn't know that women could be pilots until I was in 4th grade. That's way too late. I should have known sooner. And that was 20 years ago, and I don't feel like we've made that much progress. I mean, we made some, you've got Captain Marvel, and, there are some female superheroes out there, but girls need role models too. And also just cataloging their accomplishments and having them in our history books, knowing about what they did for our country, that it wasn't just men who sacrificed, that it was women too. It's everything. When I first learned about them, I told you I was just so enthralled with them, and I basically ran home and researched everything I could about them and learned about Jackie and the WASP, and as I've been more involved in your project, Hilary, and as I've known Jill, I've learned more and more about the WASP. I feel like every day, and there's just so much knowledge there that's not being communicated to the general public, and they should be known. I mean, just like any other war heroes or trailblazers, they should be known, and it is our job to get that word out.
Thanks, Jacquelyne. We just got a note to you from someone named Valerie Scott, who said, "Thanks for being such a great role model for others and demonstrating your professionalism and competence. Well done." And I would like to echo that big time. So I think we're out of time for questions and everything. So as we said in the beginning, this was the last in our current September series of Dare Mighty Things. I want to thank you, Jacquelyne, for your time today. You're just so incredible. I'm so honored to be your friend. And Hilary, thank you for asking me to do this and for including me. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Hilary, now to wrap up this amazing month that we've had.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you so much, Jacquelyne. And for mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles, or if you've got a neighbor who's a little girl, we do have Girls in Aviation Day on Saturday, the 25th. And I know that local Women in Aviation chapters and the 99s, that was an organization that Amelia Earhart championed as well, are doing events. So definitely, Google, I'm sure there'll be some COVID safe events as well. Again, I'm so thrilled to announce our partnership with Kent State, with Skyhack, and our competition stream to create a WASP universe, so that boys and girls can play in the WASP universe, and they can play with WASP action figures the way we might have played with GI Joes. I play with GI Joes and with He-Man and all of those sort of boy-centric action figures when I was a kid. So it's, yes, Jacquelyne, we got to have women action figures too, for both girls and boys. Women are heroes too. And we are looking for corporate sponsors to support the student teams. If you want to be involved, if you work at a corporation, we are a nonprofit. Definitely get in touch with us. I'm easy to find, but Hilary at thereddoorfilms.film, or you can contact us through our website, Facebook, message us. We have a contact us link on the website. If you can't remember names, I know it's hard. And also please check out our We Did It campaign page. We are raising finishing funds. We do have both small goals to meet and large goals to meet. Small goals, we are looking to raise at minimum $10,000 in the next month. Larger goal would be our finishing funds, which we talk about on our campaign page, but every dollar counts, and we've been very lucky to have been supported over the years from fans and donors, many repeat donors, our ambassadors and folks like Jacquelyne and Jill who get the word out. So thank you so much. And I'm Jill, we can't thank you enough on behalf of Mattia and the Red Door Films. Really, thank you women so much. And Jacquelyne, it's so great to have you wrap up our series. You guys are you're hero, you gals, you guys, you're heroes. We'll be gender neutral. Someday we'll get a term.
Thank you all so much for having me, Hilary, Mattia, Jill. It has been just a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.